color going on it. What I'm gonna do is come in here with my olive green. I'm gonna begin with the pear and really start to delineate all of these nice little circles of dark green, this texture of dappled spots. And there's a lot of light on it right now, new light. So I'm gonna come in locally, pull out my bright yellow Premier Prismacolor colored pencil, a little bit softer so I can work it in. I'm using a significant amount of pressure. I'm using a movement that is circular. Notice how this brightens it up. We're talking about color intensity here, chroma. Chroma relates to the purity of hue over the white, over the layers. This is really resounding. Look at the difference. Now, I can come in here with even that lighter cream color. Now remember, this has a lot of white in it, so it's apt to actually push down the color just a little bit. But that's okay because it's creating a transition from the highlights into the quarter tones. This is burnishing. Now, burnishing is where you're literally pressing down the fibers of the paper, really making a reflective surface. If you actually put your hand on this right now, you would feel the smooth surface as compared to some of these other areas that have not been quite so burnished. I'm gonna move into my pomegranate because right now it's looking kind of dry. So I'm gonna be working for some contrast in here, just as I did in the reflected surface of the champagne bucket. All color has value. Color has an intrinsic value. So if we look at these, we can see that this is lighter. This orange is lighter than the poppy red, which is lighter than the crimson, and I've got sort of a brown hue in there. So I'm gonna start with my lighter color. I am putting absolutely no pressure. I'm allowing the paper to do what this quality of paper is able to do. As a cold press paper, it has so much tooth in it. Again, it's just grabbing. So I'm working out of those hot spots with orange. Now, the pomegranate seeds are not orange, they're red, but in the lighter areas, they're reflecting some of that orange as the red becomes transparent. Now, my next color is what we would say is the hue, red, crimson, or poppy. You can see as I'm digging it in, it's starting to kind of get that shiny look to it. Remember, pomegranates, juicy, reflection, contrast, all these things are so important. Do you see how this starts to kind of come forward just a little bit more? Pulling out my darker color now. This is a Tuscan red. Tuscan red is almost a blue red, kind of a blood red. I'm using quite a bit of pressure here. Coming around, down, getting that push-pull, getting the richness that brings that forward. We have little windows of pomegranate in here, recapturing some of the dark in here to embrace the form just a little bit more. And I don't want to lose any of those speckles, so I'll lighten up, vary the pressure as I go across this very ripening fruit. I'm going to come in here. This has to be very burnished and smoothed down. You'll see as I do this how these seeds start to pop. Now I'm going to pick out a blue that is really kind of bright. This blue, true blue, can go into some of the areas along the hot spots and into the shadows. Now normally we would not see that blue. We would say, what? Where did you get that? But if you look and spend some time observing, you'll see that that blue exists along in the shadows. It's a color of luminosity. It's a color of inner glow. And I'm gonna put it alongside its complement, which is an orange, which is gonna make that really, really pop. When you put complementary colors next to each other, they push each other dramatically. So I'm gonna pick out some neutrals as well. I'm gonna start with the dark because I see that some of these lights are bouncing off one another and I wanna subdue this just a little bit without losing its contrast. I'm gonna repeat it in the lace. I am not particularly concerned of drawing it so accurately. I'm giving an impression. of the lace. Now I want to punch it out a little bit. This indigo blue, again, my black is very, very dull at this point. So I know that if I push into it, I'm not going to scratch up the surface because this surface of the champagne vessel is very smooth and shiny. This is a very sharp French gray. It's not a Verithin, it's the Premier colored pencils. I can come in, put some pressure on it after that point wears down a little bit, and pull out some of that reflection. I'm gonna pull out some of the light on that edge to make that form come forward. I need to lose this white, so I'm gonna push it down with this French gray. Now I'm actually changing my drawing to meet the light that I'm currently experiencing. So it's shifting from my reference into what I'm seeing now. That is one of the benefits of working with colored pencils. You are able to kind of go in and pull and push and get things to move gradually, and you can change things easily. Okay, I'm gonna use a Verithin to start to blend on the surface. Now, as I'm doing this, I'm getting this sense that I'm close to finishing, although I have some areas that remain very gestural. But it's a good point to start to see where I can create some dominance and some subordination, where I'm going to achieve a focal point. I might extend a color in a way that is not representative of what I'm looking at. So as I'm looking at this, I'm gonna really, really embrace these relationships because for me, this is where the most interest remains. So I'm gonna create even more punch, more push-pull in the relationship between the pear, the pomegranate, and the champagne bucket, so that the eye will be pulled toward the midground as opposed to the foreground. So that what happens when you look at it, where you're first gonna be attracted to are the areas that are burnished, the areas that show this detail. One of the questions that I am asked frequently is, how do you know when it's done? How do you know when you're finished? What I find is you need to say to yourself, okay, there's a point where it gets overworked. There's a point where I may be making this into something that you would see in a coloring book. It's at that point you want to question what you're going for in terms of visual meaning, communication, the poetry. And as I'm watching this, it's telling me a story. As an artist, I won't ever be able to look at a pear the same. As the viewer of the piece, I hope that a similar experience is being offered. You look at that pomegranate and have a luscious, wistful memory of what it can become.